we do have a tweet from the president. We also have our justice correspondent, Pete Williams, standing by as well. This is President Trump a few moments ago. Apparently he was, in fact, watching and listening. Quote, "Nothing changes from the Mueller report. There was insufficient evidence, and therefore, in our country, a person is innocent. The case is closed. Thank you." Our chief legal correspondent standing by. Is that how it works?
Well, good news. I mean, it's a serious day, but the tweet is laughable. The defendant says the case is closed. If only. Look, as we've reported in the past, there was good news in the Mueller report for Donald Trump, chiefly in the lack of a chargeable election conspiracy. I've said that before, and I'll say it again in fairness to him. But no, the case is not closed. As Chuck Todd was just saying, as John Brennan was saying, as other people have said who I don't think bring necessarily any assumption about the outcome, the Mueller report stated Congress deals with high crimes by the president. And the only reason that there wasn't, from the beginning, a treatment of whether or not Donald Trump committed a crime was because of the rules of the Justice Department, i.e. the tweet you just read, which we report, of course, what the president says, is false. It is in its substance and essence false. Now, the other point I wanted to raise, building on what Chuck Todd was telling us, is the Democrats were just told by Bob Mueller that he doesn't have reason at this stage to go and say a lot more in public because the report represents the most careful and clear presentation of his findings. The other way, though, that the country could hear from Bob Mueller, what Chairman Nadler just alluded to, what Justin Amash is talking about, is if there was an actual impeachment probe, not a summary of the report, but an impeachment probe set of hearings or a process to impeach or a collection of evidence or a House vote or a Senate trial. I'm not prejudging whether or not any of those things would happen, but if they did, yes, you could call in the prosecutor and members of his team to present the evidence because there would be a constitutionally warranted process whereby prosecutors would present evidence. What Mueller is saying is not he'll never talk, I don't think. What he's saying, and I think Chuck Todd nailed it, is if asked to talk about the report, he's going to say, well,
read the report.
Did you read it?
No.
Do you want me to read parts of it? Is this Reading Rainbow? Remember, a great show, but Bob Mueller is more serious than that. And so I say that deliberately. He's saying this is not Reading Rainbow.
Yeah.
Read the report, decide what to do about it. And if Congress wants to hold an impeachment probe or present evidence, he'll get involved. And I think that is a very key thing today, Craig, because the last thing I'll say, I know you got a lot of guests to get to. Yeah. We have every indication that Bob Mueller wasn't trying to give a televised press conference, wasn't rushing out to speak about this, was hoping the process would work and that Congress would come to a judgment, yes or no. And instead, Congress has done a lot of, well, we might need more from Mueller and it might take more time. And he's put an end to that. The ball is in Congress's court 100% today.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.